All right, well, good morning, everybody. Glad you're here. Thanks for taking time. We certainly want to express and share with you some of the successes we've seen in the last couple of years. I want to begin by thanking senators that have joined me today. Bob Casey, who's the co-chair of this particular task force and working group, has done a great job. And obviously, I want to thank Senators Moran, Manchin, Toomey, Heinrich, Vitter, Tester, and Collins for all being part of this working group. As you know, working groups kind of come and go, and I think studies come and go over a period of time. But this has been a working group that has been out there for a couple of years. And what we want to do today is to let you know that it's kind of like the economy. The economy's improving, but we have a long way to go to get to the finish line, and that's how we feel on claims backlog. And those are two words that probably bother me the most. I'm assuming it probably bothers Bob the most. Everybody's up here, Pat and Joe, and everybody on this working group. Claims backlog. I know claims backlog drives the VA crazy. I know claims backlog drives Secretary McDonald crazy, and I'll tell you who drives the craziest, and that is the servicemen and women themselves. And I just want to share with you why this is important, and then we'll talk about some of the successes and then what work we have in front of us. So the question is, why is this important? I got a couple of examples. A Marine who lost an eye and the use of his right arm and leg from an IED explosion waited for more than 18 months for his claim. A woman who broke her back while flying a Black Hawk helicopter waited 9 months for her claim. A veteran raising his daughter and struggling to keep a job due to his back pain had to wait 9 months for his claim. And I just want to share one from Nevada, a veteran who said, as a disabled vet, I used the VA facility and continue to battle the system, and he puts that in quote, the system, to move a service-connected disability claim through. We have tens of thousands of battle-damaged vets that need immediate help, and the system is stacked against us, and we deserve better. So I am sure that everybody standing in front of you today, whether it's through town hall meetings back in their state, letters, faxes, telephone calls will tell you that veterans are concerned about this issue, and that's why we're in front of you today. So I've got a chart here in front of you that talks a little bit about what this working group has accomplished over the last 2 years. Casey and I have worked hard on this, and you can see the changes. Changes were the backlogs, with the actual number of claims, and also the amount of time it takes to move these claims forward. And you can see that there are some successes. We don't have a lot of successes here in Washington, D.C., but you can see over the last 2 years what this has meant to our servicemen and women. And I'm pleased. We have literally cut the backlog, both the time and the claims themselves, in half over the last couple of years, and the goal is to cut it in half again. We want to make sure that these servicemen and women get the services that they need. So we're going to continue with this. We've taken, either the VA has adopted or legislation has been accepted at the end of last session. 6 of the recommendations that came out of the 2014 working group report, and we are going to add more to that. As you can see at your seat, we have the 2015 working group report. Why don't you take a look at that? It talks more about these statistics, so I don't have to get into them myself, but I'll tell you the reason I'm here today is that Nevada was one of the worst when it came to the backlog. And I'm pleased to stand up here in front of you today to tell you that in 2013 it took 539 days to turn a claim around, and today we're talking 255 days. And the goal is to cut it in half again. So VA is going to work hard. I know the Secretary is tired of me talking to him about this, and will continue to do so. So what we want is the Department of Defense and the VA to actually start talking to each other. Two separate entities that very rarely get an opportunity to actually mesh and talk. That's what some of the recommendations are going to be in the 2015 report, is to get the Department of Defense, get the VA, actually start talking to each other in the transition of these servicemen and women so that they can move forward. Also, we want to make sure that these veterans, soon-to-be veterans, are educated. I have a brother that they retired a couple years ago after more than 20 years in the Navy, and he said they started his claim a year before he actually retired. And that has been the recommendation of the Department of Defense, because they're so concerned at how slow these claims occur with the VA. And finally, we want to address the management of some of the offices, and that's really important to me. We have in Nevada, our regional office has not had a manager or a director for over a year. And you have to wonder, how does an office continue to move forward? So those are some of the issues that we're going to touch, we're going to discuss, and in the work package you can see that there are some real recommendations of moving that forward. So having said all that, I'm pleased to be here with these senators that are as eager as I am to fix this problem and continue to fix this problem. And with that, I'd like to introduce to you Senator Casey.
Thanks, Dean.
You bet, Bob.
I want to thank Senator Heller for his work. When we came together, what seems to be years ago now, but only, I guess, 2 years ago, to begin work with our staffs on the working group, and then that led to not only the report, and I'll highlight that a little bit today, but also, most importantly, the legislation we introduced last year and will be reintroducing today. I wanted to thank Senator Heller, along with the other senators who are on the bill and were on the previous version of the bill, and of course today Senator Manchin, Senator Toomey, and others who aren't with us but who are helping us get the bill passed. One of the questions we have to ask if you're an elected official, especially elected by the people of your state to represent them in Washington, is, are you doing everything you can to be worthy of the valor of the people that serve, and to do everything you can to achieve the objectives that they expect us to achieve when it comes to supporting our military, and then, of course, supporting our veterans when they come home after service. And also, of course, that includes the expectations, the legitimate expectations of their families. These veterans and their families have earned these benefits, and we have to make sure we're doing everything possible to live up to that. Unfortunately, in so many aspects of what happens here in Washington, those expectations are not being met. We all know about the VA healthcare problem. Some progress made there, but a long way to go. And we're talking today, of course, about the claims backlog. And we know that not only in Pennsylvania, Senator Toomey and I talk to families all the time who are just asking us to make the system work for them, to make sure that they get the benefits that they have earned. I've heard from families who have called our office, and just by way of example, we have constituent service operations every day that deal with issues and problems that people have, and about a quarter of them, on average, are on veterans issues. So you can just imagine the volume of work in just one Senate office. Lately, though, we've heard from families that aren't just waiting the 125 days, which would make it a backlog claim, or 200 days or 300 days, some of them waiting 2 years. Of course, that's not every instance, but we've heard from families making that assertion, and we have to make sure that we're doing everything possible to meet those expectations. So there is progress that's been made, and we've highlighted, Senator Heller highlighted some of that today, and we're grateful that these numbers are coming down, but much more work needs to be done. I wanted to highlight just two provisions of the bill, among many, but Section 201, for example, requires that the Comptroller General audit all of the regional offices of the Veterans Benefit Administration, Veterans Benefits, plural, Administration, to, quote, assess the consistency of the decisions being made, unquote, regarding benefit claims and ways to improve that process. So that's a mandatory requirement. If you go through the bill, you'll see a lot of requirements, not just suggestions or good ideas, but requirements that we expect the VA to fulfill. There's another section of the bill, Section 301, which makes sure that we're not just talking about what the VA must do, but other branches, other agencies of the federal government. For example, the Department of Defense has to make sure that they're giving information to the VA so that these claims can be processed. So if you look at Section 301C, it calls upon, among others, the VA Secretary and the Defense Secretary to develop and implement procedures to improve the, quote, timely provision, unquote, of information to process claims. So this isn't simply a VA problem. This is a federal government problem. And if we don't take these steps, and the passage of the legislation will ensure that this isn't just a set of ideas, it's a set of mandatory requirements that the VA must comply with to get these claims processed more expeditiously, to reduce the backlog even further than you see here, and to make sure that we're meeting the expectations of veterans and their families. If we do that, if the VA does it, and if other parts of the federal government does that, we can restore confidence not only in the VA, but in the operations of the federal government. We are a ways from doing that. We've got a ways to go. But I think that's a mission that's not only worthy of a great nation, it is our obligation to achieve that. And with that, I want to introduce my colleague from Pennsylvania, Senator Toomey.
Thank you very much, Senator Casey. And I'd like to start by just saluting and thanking Senator Casey and Senator Heller for their leadership on this. It was their idea to form this working group, and I think it's been very, very constructive. I appreciate Senator Manchin and the other senators who have been involved in this as well very, very much. The idea that the men and women who serve this country in uniform, who make huge sacrifices for us, who take enormous risks, who pay such a steep price so often, the idea that they should come home and have to wait these unbelievably long periods of time to get a simple adjudication of a perfectly legitimate claim is outrageous, and it's unacceptable. And I am very pleased that working with this group and working with the VA and listening to the veterans who've brought to our attention the problems that they face, we have made some progress. And you've heard about that, and the progress is clear. But we're not finished yet. As Senator Casey correctly pointed out, there's more work to be done. One of the things that I'm pleased with about this working group is Senator Heller's exactly right. Working groups come and go, and often without much consequence. This is a group that rolled up its sleeves, got to work, understood the problem, started to dive into how to do something about it. I think it's a compelling report, and there's compelling legislation. So I think of the legislation as having two broad categories. One, tools that will help to enhance the accuracy and the quality of the actual submission, and then mechanisms that will help to make sure that that submission is handled in an accurate and timely fashion. And that's what we need to be doing. So I'm pleased with the progress we've had so far, determined to continue to make more progress going forward, and grateful to the senators, the bipartisan group of senators that have played a very constructive role in this. And with that, let me introduce one who has played an active role from the beginning, Senator Manchin from West Virginia.
Again, I reiterate what Pat had just said about our two colleagues here as far as Senator Heller and Senator Casey and all of the sponsors of this bill and piece of legislation. First of all, you would think about the main thing that brings us all together in bipartisan fashion, as you see us here, is how do we defend the homeland? And those people who defend the homeland and willing to do whatever, and putting that uniform on, willing to take a bullet for you and I. So it's only right that we would defend them every way we possibly can for the service they've given. So this is really what brings us all together. With that being said, you would think, why do we need legislation? Why shouldn't this just be absolutely something that we all were committed to doing? I believe everybody that works for the VA is committed and dedicated to doing the best they can to serve the VA. But it's grown, like most agencies, to where it hasn't functioned properly and it's not as efficient as it should be. So that's the eyes of us. Every one of us will tell you that our claims divisions, people who do our claim work, case work back home and in our offices here, that a majority of our casework is done on veterans issues. It's that important to us. So when Bob and Dean saw this, and Dean having a much larger problem, disproportionate in his state, it says enough's enough. And that's really what it's all about. And all we're saying is we're going to get our act together. We want the VA to get its act together, streamlined, so all the different regions are working off the same script, if you will, the same page. Not so many people doing something differently than other people. Sometimes we have people that call our office, all they want is an answer. Just give me an answer. Is this going to be awarded to me or not? Is it something that I deserve or not? Just tell me. And it takes 300, 400, 500 days just to get an answer. It's ridiculous. And we can do better than that. So I think it just came to a head to where we've all said enough is enough and we've got to do something about it. They've taken the lead. We're right there with them, shoulder to shoulder, and we're going to get this done. And we're going to make sure that the veterans get the service that they have deserved because they've given us the service that we have needed. And when someone is willing to take a bullet for me, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they know I appreciate and respect that, and will do everything I can to give them the services they need. So again, I thank my dear colleagues here, and we're going to work to make sure this is a success.
Thank you.
Dean, thank you.
Thanks.
Bob? Thanks, bud. Appreciate
We'll
it.
open up to a couple of questions. I just want to make one comment, and that is I'm grateful for the service organizations, all the service organizations from VFW, DAV, and others that have come together and supported this legislation to make it happen what it is today. Grateful for their help and support, because we wouldn't have been able to do it without the service organizations behind us. So anyway, at this point,
Senator Heller, can you talk more about the audit that you want done? I'm wondering, are you skeptical of the numbers that the VA is putting forward on improvements, or what is it exactly that you want to check out?
I just want to open it up. I want to have the audits done. I think the results will speak for themselves. This isn't a witch hunt. All three of us up here support the VA. Yeah. We want to see them succeed. So we're hoping that this is a step in the right direction to actually assisting the VA themselves into servicing our servicemen and women as they need it. So no witch hunt. Just an opportunity for us to open their books and take a look at it. If there are ways for improvement, we're all for it. So that's why we're pushing the investigation and the audits.
Let me just say one thing about audits. If the audit can show best practices in certain parts of the country that have been able to perform well and beyond what we've been able to show here as an average, why shouldn't we adopt that throughout? So sometimes we're not even speaking to each other. We don't even know, and that's what really, truly an audit can give us transparency we need.
Which is one of the reasons why the bill that we had last session talked about the allocation of funding. We wanted to make sure that these regional offices around the country have similar funding mechanisms, so that we don't have regional offices that may be doing just fine, but there's a reason. There's a reason why they are, and if it's resources, let us know. That's why these audits are being held.
Is there any reason to mistrust or not believe the numbers that the VA puts together as far as how things are getting better in their view?
Let me just add one thing to that. I think that if you look at the, and I'm just looking at page 25 of the report. Obviously, this report goes beyond the bill. This gives a great summation of the process. It also gives some history and also updates folks on what's changed since we started. But on page 25, the reference at the top of the page to this review, it is an audit, and it should be. I think it should be an audit. But just like any agency, having an outside auditor or an outside entity to review, I think is by definition going to have more credibility, number one. Number two is you have these 56 offices, and believe it or not, some of them are doing a good job. And part of the process isn't simply to get the right numbers, but to identify what's working in those other offices. So I think it stands to reason. It's always better if you're not auditing yourself or not investigating yourself. So I think it helps to enhance the credibility, because in the end, that's what's been broken here. A system is broken, but in a larger sense, confidence in a system, and that's damaging, and that's why we have to take aggressive steps to correct it.
I think Senator McDonald, Secretary McDonald, Bob McDonald, has the ability to do the job. I truly believe in him. And he has the experience. He has proven experience. He's come from a very successful background, had a tremendous educational background, and served the military and has done a great job for our country. He's come back now. I think we need to give him all the support we can, Democrats and Republicans working together to fix this. And I think I think you'll see him put a team together, and he's been acquiring this team, and I've been impressed with the people I've met on this team. He's making some changes, and I think you're going to see some results. But we've got to make sure that we're keeping an eye on it too. That's our job.
Just so that you're aware of, we're aggressive. We really want to pursue this. And one of the reasons is we have reason to believe, and I think it's been reported in the past, that some numbers have been manipulated as far as these claims are concerned, changing the dates and some of the. We want to get to the bottom of some of those issues. So it may be painful to get through this process, but I think it's an imperative that we do get through this process in order for us to offer the kind of services that these service men and women deserve.
Thank you.
Can you talk about why you think some of this manipulation of numbers at places like the Philadelphia VA are more widespread?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you want to answer your...
What's the question? I'm sorry.
Let
Yeah,
Pennsylvania answer
why,
this question.
or do you think, let me ask that, do you think and then why some of the mismanagement at places like the Philadelphia VA, like potentially changing the claims dates, could be more widespread?
Well, I can't say that I know that it is. I mean, sometimes, in my home state, we had problems in the Philadelphia office that have been outlined by the recent investigation. In Pittsburgh, we had a wholly different problem, the so-called Legionnaires outbreak in the water system. That was a completely different problem, but a very severe problem that led to the deaths of 5 veterans. So. But that doesn't mean that there's going to be a water system problem in every region or every office. But one of the reasons we know about the contours of and the details of what happened in Philadelphia is because we had an independent investigation. So I think it backs up what we're trying to do on the auditing and the oversight. And also, you'll notice in the bill, there's a lot of requires and musts and kind of mandatory features, and a lot of reporting to Congress, not simply broad-based how's it going reports that sometimes get generated, but reports on specifics about not just how many claims are being processed, but whether or not, in fact, we actually require a report to make sure that the other federal government agencies are doing their job to get the VA the information. So this becomes a mandatory obligation of more than just one department.
Is there a cost to what you recommended here? Any added cost, and if there is, how do you come up with that money?
Well, Dean.
I don't think there's a fiscal.
Yeah, I don't think there's a fiscal note to it, but this is under the category of whatever it takes, whatever resources we need, whatever appropriations we need. If there are additional appropriations, I'm signing on the dotted line to say we'll support it, because if we can't appropriate dollars, if necessary, to make these kinds of improvements, then we might as well not have a federal government. I believe that strongly in it.
And the good news is that talking to the chairman of the Veterans Committee, he's going to hold a hearing on this bill next week. So we'll get down to the nitty-gritty on this and find out if there's a fiscal issue, and we'll get some compelling arguments from the VA as to what's needed and necessary in order to fulfill what the law says and what we're trying to achieve.
What we didn't mention, I should have mentioned it, is the bipartisan support that this bill has. We have, I guess, other than the two of us, 7, if I have the count right, but we'll get that number for you, and that's pretty significant. In fact, we had almost a pairing where people would, individual senators would join a Democrat and a Republican. So it's a good foundation and a pretty broad-based degree of support based upon who signed on as co-sponsors.
And with the support of the chairman, I have real good feelings that a markup will be soon after, and we'll be able to move this legislation. So anyway, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Dean. Appreciate it.